Good morning, members of the press and public. Thank you for being here today to learn about this important piece of legislation that we're bringing forward, the Law Enforcement Scholarship Act of 2025. My name is Dan Wolgamott. I'm serving in my fourth term representing District 14B, which is the St. Cloud and Minden Township communities. And I also serve as the co-chair of the House Higher Education Finance and Policy Committee. And we are here before you today, a united group of bipartisan, bicameral legislators standing with our law enforcement because right now, Minnesota is facing a law enforcement workforce shortage that directly impacts the safety and security of our communities. Right now, there are over 1,000 open positions in law enforcement. Stacked on top of that, there are over 2,700 officers who are in the 50 to 55 retirement age. That is over a third of our police officer workforce that is either vacant or set to retire. Again, this is a crisis situation that impacts our police department's ability to have the men and women in uniform on the street that we need to keep our communities, keep our homes, keep our schools, keep our workplaces safe. This is a crisis, and the state of Minnesota needs to use every single tool in its toolbox to address this law enforcement workforce shortage. And as the co-chair of the House Higher Education Committee, one of the tools that I have in my toolbox to address this issue are scholarships. And that's why, again, we've built this bipartisan, bicameral coalition working with law enforcement to put forward the Police Officer Law Enforcement Scholarship Act of 2025. Here's what the bill does. Modeled after successful legislation and a program that's been implemented in the state of Nebraska, this bill will create scholarships for police officers and their dependents to pursue degrees in law enforcement and criminal justice at any one of our colleges and universities, both in the University of Minnesota system and the Minn State College and University system. The goal is to attract new officers to come to the state of Minnesota, to retain those officers that we have in that potential retirement period, and to empower and educate the next generation of law enforcement so that we can get the younger generation in the profession educated, ready to pursue a fulfilling career of keeping our community safe. That's why we're bringing the bill forward. That's what the bill does. And to provide further context on the need to pass this legislation, I'm going to turn it over to Officer Ross. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Mark Ross. I am the president of the St. Paul Police Federation. I've been a police officer in St. Paul for 24 years, and I'm also on the board of directors for the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association. I would like to thank Representative Wolgamott for taking this and running with it. For the last 4 years, we have had robust discussions about how we were going to address this crisis. We know it's coming. We're in the midst of it, and we're doing everything we can to avoid this. This program is going to go a long ways for recruitment and retention of police officers in the state of Minnesota, and this impacts our safety statewide. And one theme you're going to catch on to as you watch this legislation go through the process is the bipartisan support that it has. And if you spent enough time around this place, you'll find that's not always the case. So I'm really, really proud of all of our politicians and lawmakers that have jumped on board and support this, and I really look forward to it. It's probably one of the most exciting pieces of legislation we've seen in quite some time. So thank you very much.
I'm Senator Judy Seeberger. I represent Senate District 41. We've heard for some time now the crisis that law enforcement has been facing with regard to retention and recruitment of officers. I'm proud to sponsor this bill. I agree it's going to go a long way to address that issue and work towards solving that problem. This bill, in addition to providing scholarships, also provides a pathway for perhaps non-traditional students who are at a point in their lives or careers where they may be making a change or entering or re-entering the workforce. So it's exciting in that regard also. I am proud of the bipartisan nature of this bill, the bipartisan bicameral nature of this bill, and look forward to hopefully advancing this through a somewhat challenging legislative session, but I've got high hopes that we can get it there. Thanks.
All right, and with that, we'll be more than happy to take any questions you might have.
Can we hear from the other side of the aisle too? Any Republican senator or rep want to talk about why you're standing with Democrats together?
Thank you. I am Representative Bernie Perryman. I represent 14A, which is South St. Cloud. Split it with my companion here, St. Augusta, St. Joseph, and Waite Park. Dan, Representative Wolgamott and I have worked together on a lot of bipartisan issues that are good for St. Cloud. Now we're just expanding that out to include a lot more of our area and really the whole state of Minnesota's influx of our public safety policemen numbers down. We're both very involved with our St. Cloud Police Department, but I also have sheriffs. I also, deal with the country, the rural area, and the workforce or the public safety in those areas are shrinking. And I believe this was a great bill. We worked on it together as well, but it's a great bill because it's looking at non-traditional individuals that might leave one area of workforce, but see this as a calling to them and running to it. And I come from, I will say, a public safety family from St. Louis, Missouri, and I have always been close to my cops. I always say I love my cops. I thank my cops. Without them running to save me or protect us, we are all in trouble. So this was near and dear to my heart when Representative Wolgamott did bring it to me. It is bipartisan, as you can see, and I thank everyone for coming today to tell the story about bipartisan good work and policy with this bill that we're looking at today. And it's Bill House File 2454, and I ask everyone that's watching from afar, go and look it up and see how good it is and tell others in the community.
I'm interested if someone could talk a little bit about eligibility, availability, what that looks like, how many people can apply, how many people get awarded this, and who, again, is eligible. You said dependents. That's extensive.
Absolutely. So there are three main criteria of people who are eligible for this scholarship. It is licensed police officers, the dependents of licensed police officers, and the dependents of police officers who have 100% permanent duty disability. As far as how many people will be able to apply for this, those are details that we'll be working out through the legislative process. We still don't know what our budget is going to look like in the Higher Education Committee. I know that the finance chairs are negotiating that right now, but we do know that this is a crisis. We do know that we want to do everything that we can to get more officers on the streets. That's why we're bringing this bill forward today. And I know that all of us here and many of our other colleagues who couldn't make it here but support this legislation, we're doing everything that we can to advocate to those finance chairs that we get the funding and the resources that we need to make as big of an investment as we can so that we can provide as many opportunities through this scholarship as we can.
Very brief follow to that. Is dependence of police officers extended to dependence of former police officers, maybe those who are retired as well?
Currently licensed police officers. Yep.
So this isn't extend to, I don't have any law enforcement in my family, but I want to become a police officer. I cannot qualify for this, or I can?
If you need to either be a police officer or the dependent of a police officer to qualify for the scholarship. That's the retention aspect of this.
Can I go back and have Senator Duckworth too, because I want to talk about the bipartisan nature, and I do know both of you are from competitive districts too. Does it behoove you?
My district is competitive.
In
I'm just teasing,
Yeah.
I'm just teasing. Just to quickly circle back to your question, and Representative Wolgamott would know this as well. So I'm on the Higher Education Committee in the Senate, and there are other grants and scholarship opportunities for folks that maybe don't have a parent who is currently a licensed police officer to get funding to pursue a career in law enforcement. That was
Philando Castile.
That's a little bit different. I'm happy to talk about that one later, though. But there are other options, because at the end of the day, here's what we all know. For better, for worse, it is what it is. there was a period of time in which discussions surrounding the profession of being in law enforcement became highly political and highly politicized. This is a bipartisan effort by both Republicans and Democrats to say we've had enough of that. It doesn't do anybody any good. It's to the detriment of public safety in the state of Minnesota to have heightened polarization regarding public safety and police officers. Let's put that aside and let's build back up this profession, because we're in a situation right now that we have never experienced before. Whether you're trying to become a state trooper, whether you're applying to be a police officer, applications, the amount of people that apply for these jobs used to be through the roof, and now it's few and far between. That's a huge issue that we have to change, and that's why you're seeing a bipartisan bill seeking to impact that positively. One of the questions I always ask the chief when I see him, the chief of police in Lakeville, is I say, hey, how's your strength? How's your manning? And he'll say, well, I'm authorized at X, but we've only got X. There's always a shortage and a gap. And what we're seeking to do right now is restore the nobility and the honor and the reputation that this profession is deserving of, so that people, once again, choose to pursue it very aggressively. When I went to school, one of my minors was in criminal justice. For a while, I planned to become a cop. Joined the military instead and did a whole other host of things. But right now, we've got a lot of young people, or a lot of folks that have chosen other career paths that never really considered this profession, or we've got people exiting the profession because we have made it uncomfortable and unbearable for them to even think about pursuing or staying in. That's got to change. And by both Republicans and Democrats standing here today saying we support our cops, we support our police, we desire to see phenomenal public safety throughout the state of Minnesota and our communities, so they can have the confidence and assurance knowing their state lawmakers have their backs and would do whatever it is that we need to support them, support their loved ones, and make sure that this is a career that's worth pursuing and staying in.
If someone's already a police officer, could somebody speak to why they might be seeking additional education in one of these areas through scholarship?
Currently in the state of Minnesota, you are only required to have a 2-year degree to obtain your peace officer's license. What this would do, this would allow current employees that have 2-year degrees, it would allow them to go back and get a baccalaureate degree. So to them, it would benefit them by 2 years of tuition that would be covered under this grant. So there's some incentive there for those folks to go on and further educate themselves.
And that extra education helps with, say, when you're actually on the job.
Well, it can help with promotional opportunities. There are certain departments that offer educational, further financial incentives depending on how much education you have. And again, it's just further education for our workforce. It just gives us a more professional workforce, and it gives those folks an opportunity that don't already have that 4-year degree to go out and earn that. And they see a lot of value. When your employer says, hey, we see value in this, and we're going to cover this for you, that's a big deal. And I know a lot of folks with 2-year degrees that are pretty excited about this as well.
Is there any requirement that if someone is awarded such scholarship that they stay and work for police departments in the state of Minnesota?
That, you're going to have to speak to the language.
Yeah.
In that.
No, there's no requirement for that. We find, at least in my time in higher education, we found that doing such requirements are really difficult to enforce. So we do our best, and you've seen the numbers. When people come to Minnesota, when they get their education in Minnesota, by far the vast majority of those folks stay and work in Minnesota, and that's what we expect to happen by giving these people going into law enforcement the opportunity to go and learn and get their degree at one of the U of M campuses, at one of the Minn State campuses. We expect those trends will continue, and that by far the vast majority of those folks would stay and work here in Minnesota.
For those kids that are children or dependents of licensed officers, what if they're getting their education and they change their mind about what they want to do? Is there any requirement that they have to pursue?
Yes. So the grant is given on a semester by semester basis, and it has to go to, the requirement is it goes to a degree or program related to law enforcement or criminal justice.
You mentioned the program is modeled after something in Nebraska. When was that implemented, and how do you measure success in the program that is in the state of Nebraska?
I can't remember offhand when it was implemented, but in our conversations that we've all had, or at least I've had, and I know my partners here with the MPPOA have had, we've heard stories of their numbers increasing, of folks moving to Nebraska from other states. So we're, I guess, as far as I'm concerned, hearing the success and the positivity from conversations that we've had with law enforcement officials in Nebraska. If you want to speak to that.
Yeah, it's been really difficult to get exact numbers in terms of how well it's worked in Nebraska. As I understand it, each school tracks it a little differently, so it's hard to find it in kind of a general repository. But I can tell you that my counterpart in Omaha, Nebraska, said that he surmises there's at least 24 senior officers who have remained with the Omaha PD to take advantage of this benefit for their children. Now, that's important now for us because we have so many people approaching retirement age. If they all decide to go, then we're going to be out 2,500 cops within the next 5 years, and we don't know that we have the people to come in and replace all those cops. So does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it says, I heard it could be renewed up to for 2 years. Could you get covered? It sounds like, I mean, the bill says 1 semester each, but then may be renewed, but doesn't say for how long. Is that 2 years? I heard someone say that.
Yeah, and a lot of that will be fluid as we go through the process, depending on how much we're able to get for our higher education target and depending on how much we're able to allocate for this program. The bill was just introduced yesterday, is my understanding, in the Senate. The bill, in about 1 hour, I'm going to hear it in the Higher Education Committee, so that's at least where we're starting. But again, the scope of that, we expect that to change be amendable as the bill goes through the process and we get more of a sense of what's our higher education budget target, how much are we able to allocate for this program.
Are you worried there's really not gonna be much money for this? I mean, you're talking about a really tight budget and staring down a $6 billion deficit in 2 years.
Yeah, that's why we're here and why we're grateful that you all came to draw attention to this. That's why we're working together as House and Senate Republicans and Democrats to get support for this. We know that the budget is in a tough situation, but we also know that we will get such a good return on the investment of making sure that our police departments have the men and women in uniform that they need to be able to keep our communities safe. So we are cognizant of the budgetary restrictions that all legislation is facing this session, but we up here, we're not just gonna sit and use that as an excuse to let our law enforcement workforce crisis continue. This is why we're working together, bipartisan, bicameral, to generate as much support as we can for this. And as Representative Perryman said, we hope that folks watching at home who care about safety and security in their communities will help join us in advocating for this legislation and coming up with the investment that we need to be able to make a meaningful impact on this program.
Do you have a fiscal note?
We don't know.
A price range on this?
We
So scarce, like
Right, I mean,
ballpark?
again, the way the process in this will work, we don't have a fiscal note yet. Likely what will be determined more is what do we get for our target in the Higher Education Committee? How does that impact our bottom line in the higher education budget? It will determine what dollars are available and whether we do, again, we'll see. It's scalable and there are some unknowns on that front, but whether we start with a pilot program or are able to make a huge significant investment, anywhere in between, we are, again, facing a crisis. It's going to continue to get worse and worse. We want to do as much as we possibly can. It's a scalable bill. We want to make as much of an investment as we can in this program and get folks to come to the state of Minnesota to be in law enforcement, retain the folks that we have, and educate the next generation of police officers here in Minnesota.
Senator Seeberger, could you talk about the cost of this? Your party does have a majority, so do you have more say in the Senate in getting this through?
No, Representative Wolgamott and I are in the same party, so.
Different chamber.
Right, different chamber, but I don't have any further insight to add when it comes to what our target's going to be in any of the committees. That's a big unknown and something that we're all wrestling with across the board. But I think what we have to do in the face of limited funds and uncertain targets, and I might add the uncertainty that's coming from the federal side of things with talk of cuts there, We need to prioritize here in the state of Minnesota what's important. And this bill says that all of us here are prioritizing cops.
Would you guys consider having sort of conditions on the scholarship during the duration of while they're in school, like GPA requirements, other things that could look like?
We're open to considering that. The Office of Higher Education does have some latitude to make different requirements. They also will be administering it, setting up the timelines and the application process. So as far as and again, it's a semester by semester basis. So the Office of Higher Education, as someone is renewing to get their grant for the next semester, will set that criteria for what they look at as far as reapproving someone's grant.
I just have a clarifying question. It looks like in terms of public secondary schools, this is limited to Minnesota State colleges and University of Minnesota.
Correct. Yep, it's for any of the campuses within the University of Minnesota system, and then any of the campuses at the Min-State colleges and university system.
Mr. Ross, can you talk a little bit about, I'm just wondering if you can speak to law enforcement running in the family, so to speak, like how often do you see somebody whose parent was a law enforcement officer and then the child want to consider it, or they don't often consider it, seeing what their parent goes through, and so this is why you're trying to target that population, if you will.
That's a great question. I myself am not a legacy cop, but I work in St. Paul, and we have a lot of legacy cops, meaning that their mother or father, or maybe an uncle or aunt was a police officer. And this is a great, I can tell you that 5 years ago, I would probably suggest that 80% of cops in Minnesota recommended their children get into this field. We did a survey a couple years ago, and it was the complete opposite. 80% of our members would recommend that their children not get into this field. And this is another way for us to build our profession back up. And Senator Duckworth spoke to that. I personally believe that police officers it's the most noble profession in the world. We have cops out there in Minnesota. We do it really well here. Our cops out there working really hard and doing a great job throughout the entire state. And we need to just continue to put value in it. And again, bring some of those legacy cops back, because for a lot of families, you have 2, 3, 4 generations of police officers. We want to keep that going in those families. Those are some of the best, most dedicated, brightest officers we have. And there's no shortage of kids out there that want to follow in their parents' footsteps, and that's important.
I'd also like to add to that yes, this bill is about addressing the numbers and addressing the workforce shortage, but it's also about the culture that we have here in Minnesota and appreciation for law enforcement. And we want this to be just one of many tools that we use to say we welcome law enforcement, we support you, we support your families. So while this bill also deals with the workforce shortage that we're facing, we also know that we are a state that supports law enforcement, and by getting this program into effect, we will show that respect and that welcoming nature for our police officers and their families.
Obviously, you guys are standing up here, DFLers, but are there votes with the rest of your caucus for this?
Are there votes for it? Absolutely. We get this, we're working hard to get as big of a target as we have for this in our higher education budget, and we want to do everything that we can to address the workforce shortage that's facing our state with regards to law enforcement.
Would it do better standing alone then and not rolled into a bigger budget bill?
Yeah, I guess how I'm going to be operating the House Higher Education budget with Chair Rarick is we are not really passing finance bills standalone out of our committee. We will get our budget target, we will put our budget bill together, we will pass that out of our committee. That's sort of the collaborative, co-governing, 2 co-chairs, we have equal number of committee members. That's how we're choosing to advance our finance bills through the committee and onto the governor.
Where are the personnel numbers lowest, like certain departments, sheriffs, police departments, certain parts of the state?
Well, I would say the largest gap is over Minneapolis. The MPD is probably down 400 police officers. In St. Paul, we're down about 70. And for 23 and 24, we had a net loss of 18 bodies in St. Paul. So this year, hopefully we can recoup some folks. But overall, it's about 1,000, and that includes police officers, deputies, troopers, conservation officers. We're down about 1,000. And as we spoke to previously, we're looking at a loss of another 2,500 to 2,700 over the next 5 years, and we just don't have the kids coming through law enforcement programs to fill those spots.
They seem to be more in the sheriff's department, in a sheriff's department or a police department?
That I can't speak to, but I would guess, just in terms of the Twin Cities alone, we're probably down 500, so I would suspect it's police officers, but I can't speak for certain.
Officers involved in all this?
They're not. No.
Are you guys finding that the higher ranking officers will be retiring out? So the lower ranking officers, guys that are just coming in, really don't have the education enough to move up in the ranks? Is that what this is happening?
Not necessarily, though, although I would say specifically in St. Paul, when you promote too soon, you just don't have the experience that officers that have been around a little longer have. So you end up maybe in a supervisory role or command staff role, maybe sooner than you ought to. You maybe fall within the civil service guidelines and it's fine, but there's no substitute for experience in this job. So we need to fill those police cars, those guys and gals you see out in police cars and uniforms that answer the calls for service. They're the ones out there doing the real work, and we need to just fill those places. But what this will do, though, is some of these folks that are more senior, some of our senior command leaders and even senior patrol officers, they'll stick around a little longer if they have dependents that are involved in this program to take advantage of it, and we need those people to stick around right now.
Just to clarify, you said 1,000 open positions that need filled right now, but you anticipate an additional
Correct.
2,500, so you're looking at 3,500 or 3,700 open police officer positions if this is not dealt with.
Correct. We have to deal with the recruitment and retention issue right now. Yes, so in 5 years, we could potentially be facing over 3,000 person gap in terms of personnel that we could have out there licensed and working that we don't have. And that, in fact, that impacts the entire state. So we're at a point where we can't afford not to do some of these things to get our numbers back up.
What's the total amount of personnel right now? Do you know off the top of your head?
Do we have about 9,500 sworn cops? Little under 10,000 right now for sworn peace officers.
That's over a third of our workforce.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.